Ms. Quorum just walked in. All right, Casey. Okay, I call to order the FORA Reese Authority special meeting of our Board of Directors. It is 1 o'clock on Friday, May 30th. If we could have Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell, if you would please do the honor of leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Frank. Okay, we'll be going into closed session. The subject, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, government code 54956.9 Alpha 1 case, City of Marina versus FORA Reese Authority, case number M11856. Before we go into closed session, does any member of the public wish to address the Board of Directors on this item we'll be discussing in closed session? Saying no one, the public comment period is closed. We are now adjourning in open session. We're reconvening next door. We will be back as soon as we possibly can. Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm reconvening in open session. We will have an announcement out of closed session by our Attorney Counsel, Mr. John Giffen. John?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The board convened in closed session to hear the item listed on 3A1, the City of Marina versus Fort Ord Reese Authority. The board heard from counsel, and there's nothing to report out.
John, thank you much. Next roll call, Lena.
Mayor Pro Tem Beach. Here. City of Delray Oaks, Mayor Edelin.
Here.
City of Marina, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell.
Here.
City of Marina, Councilmember Morton. Here. City of Monterey, Councilmember Selfridge.
Here.
Monterey County, Supervisor Potter. Here. Monterey County, Supervisor Calcagno. Here. Monterey County, Supervisor Parker. City of Pacific Grove, Councilmember Lucius. City of Salinas, Mayor Gunter. Here. City of Sand City, Mayor Pendergrass. Here. City of Seaside, Mayor Rubio.
Here.
City of Seaside, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby. 20th Congressional District, Alec Arago. 17th State Senate District, Nicole Charles. 29th State Assembly District, Assemblymember Stone. University of California, Graham Bice. California State University, Eduardo Ochoa. Monterey Peninsula College, Walter Tribley. Monterey Peninsula Unified School District, Leslie Codian. Monterey Salinas Transit, Hunter Harvath. Here. Transportation Agency of Monterey County, Debbie Hale. United States Army, Colonel Fellinger. Fort Ord BRAC Office, Bill Collins. Marina Coast Water District, Director Moore. Here. Chair Edelin, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Lena. Next, we have announcements, acknowledgments, and correspondence. Michael?
Yes. First, I'd like to point out, Chair, that this particular week, the City of Seaside and FORA met with the Department of General Services, State of California, to discuss the schedule for the Veterans Cemetery Project. We discovered at that meeting that the Department of General Services intends to advertise this project for bids by June 18th and expects to receive bids by the end of July. In fact, on July the 9th, Department of General Services will host a pre-bid conference right here in the FORA offices. And we want to recognize the state of California's progress in that regard. I know Senator Monning's office has been following this closely and participated. I know all of you here are following closely on the progress of the project. The second item is simply an announcement. If you have not already heard, I know Councilwoman Selfridge is aware of this, but the Governor's Military Council is going to be in Monterey on June the 16th and 17th. And they'll be here to review a few items with respect to military base retention and to look at the effect of closures and recovery programs. And so we will be doing a presentation with them on the 16th, and I know others of you have been invited to participate on either the 16th or the 17th.
Thank you, Michael. Any other announcements by board members? Seeing none, we go on to business items. First business item, 7A, adopt resolution to retain Preston Park property in accordance with Government Code Section 67678B4. Now, this board is being asked to make just two findings today. First, retention of Preston Park is necessary or convenient to carrying out FORA's responsibility pursuant to law. That's the first thing we're going to be talking about. And second of all, the finding is going to be theoretically, retention of Preston Park will not cause significant financial hardship to the city of Marina. This item is not an opportunity for the board to weigh in on the ongoing litigation. Everybody knows there's litigation between the Florida Resource Authority and the city of Marina. That will be decided in a court of law probably by a jury. We're not here to litigate the case. We're just to discuss those two findings or the not findings that I just mentioned before. Board discussion, public comment should be limited to those two findings. Now, we don't want to spend, every member will have an opportunity to make a statement or an argument on behalf of each one of these things once. We're not going to go back and forth, arguing back and forth. Everybody gets one bite at the apple. When that's done, we'll go ahead and we'll have a vote and we'll go from there. Okay, Michael, you have more explanation, I believe. John, you take it next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, today we have the Preston Park retention resolution that we are considering. In order to retain Preston Park, two elements are needed to be satisfied. The state law allows FORA to retain property if the board finds, in this case, if it finds that Preston Park is necessary and convenient to carrying out, retention of Preston Park is necessary and convenient to carrying out FORA's responsibilities pursuant to law. As the board report reflects and the resolution finds, the board must find that it is necessary or convenient. That's a fairly straightforward and relaxed standard, and the two primary findings that we have are that if FORA cannot sell Preston Park, FORA will fall approximately $25 million short of being able to fund its mandated obligations. FORA has the responsibility of using monies to take care of blight, to all of the CEQA mandated and non-mandated obligations that FORA has are necessary to be funded with monies from FORA. FORA needs this money to be able to fund those obligations. If we don't, we fall short. So that's one finding. The second finding really involves where we are procedurally with our loan. We have FORA has an $18 million loan with Rabobank that is due on June 15th of 2014. We've been authorized to enter negotiations with Rabobank to extend that loan through December 15th, and those negotiations are ongoing currently. FORA needs to retain the property to be able to continue to negotiate that loan. It is the owner of this property. It has title to the property. It has been the owner for over 14 years now. What we're doing here effectively is allowing FORA to continue to own the property as it has for that period of time. So it can continue to carry out its base-wide obligations and to keep the loan from going into foreclosure. And if it does go into foreclosure, that's really a bad thing for all jurisdictions, for FORA, for Marina, and it certainly would be necessary for this board to find that retaining the property is necessary to keep the foreclosure from occurring. That is the first element, the necessary or convenient element. The second element is retention of Preston Park is possible if the board finds that it will not cause significant financial hardship to the city of Marina. As set forth in the resolution and in your board packet, to date, Marina has received approximately $18 million in loan proceeds from Preston Park, and FORA has been splitting those proceeds with Marina since the early 2000s. Once FORA is able to formally retain the property pursuant to this resolution, and if it's able to sell the property once allowed to by the court, the Superior Court of Monterey County, it does intend to share those proceeds, sale proceeds, with Marina. That share itself is estimated to be more than $30 million. So the significant financial hardship is pretty clear. I mean, that would mean that Marina would not be able to pay its bills, that it would be undergoing a significant financial hardship. And with $30 million plus coming to it from the sale of this property, I can't imagine how Marina could claim that it is under significant financial hardship. Now, it claims that they want to preserve their income stream to the property and preserve their long-term financial interest in the property. That is not, in my estimation, demonstrating the significant financial hardship that is necessary to keep FORA from retaining the property. Really, Marina has never asked, or throughout the course of the long-term relationship between Marina and FORA, has never relied on the financial aspect of Preston Park. They've always wanted to control the property, and that is not part of this analysis. We have these two elements that the board must meet, and the findings are clear and concise, and it is up to the board to make those findings, of course, and I will turn it over to the board now.
Okay, out to board members. Again, comments, please keep your comments to these two findings, and one shot per board member. Who would like to make some comments, or do we have any comments by board members? Going once?
Public?
Okay, saying none, we're out to the public. Any members of the public like to weigh in on this item?
Good afternoon, Chair Edlin and members of the FORA board. I respectfully ask that the letter that I'm about to begin reading to you be included in the minutes today in their entirety. I don't know that between myself and 3 others we'll be able to complete the letter. Dear FORA board members, the City of Marina objects to the proposed adoption of the resolution of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority that purports to retain the Preston Park property for purposes of liquidating the property, as well as FORA's characterization of the facts leading FORA to take this action. The action before the FORA board is a resolution ostensibly being considered pursuant to Government Code Section 67678B4. However, the very language of the resolution defeats the requirements of Government Code Section 67678B4. Section 67678B4 is a provision of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Act dealing with the disposition of property at the former Fort Ord. Section 67678 generally calls for the rapid disposition of property at the former Fort Ord. Subsection B4 is limited exception with the section 67678 that allows FORA to retain property only if it is necessary and convenient to carrying out the authority's responsibilities under the Act. The proposed resolution appears to equate retain with sale or liquidation. The American Heritage Dictionary defines retain to mean to keep or hold one's possession. It is impossible to fathom how FORA can both retain the property and liquidate the property. The Monterey Superior Court has already prohibited FORA from selling the property until a trial on the City of Marina's case can be held. Moreover, the staff report accompanying the proposed resolution, as well as the resolution itself, inaccurately state that Marina and FORA shared the understanding that Marina would be required to buy out FORA's interest in Preston Park if Marina wanted to hold title to the property. Over the course of the parties' dealings on Preston Park, there have been a variety of discussions regarding the ultimate disposition of Preston Park. A review of the correspondence between the parties does not demonstrate any shared understanding, and indeed, FORA's own understanding appears to have evolved over time. A review of various FORA reports and studies demonstrate that
30
FORA,
seconds.
at least initially, had the intention of conveying Preston Park to the City of Marina at no cost once FORA obtained title to the property from the Army, just as all other base property located within city limits was conveyed to the City of Marina. At some point in time, FORA took the position that would only convey Preston Park to Marina if Marina paid the development fees that FORA had determined were owed on the property. Although FORA has been unable to point to any provision in its development fee legislation that would indicate that development fees are
Your
owed on the...
time is up, ma'am. We
Thank
did
you.
receive the letter, and it has been accepted.
Thank you.
Councilmember, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Thank you. And now I'm just going to continue on reading the letter.
That's fine.
I'm going to pick up FORA's claim that Marina had to buy out its interest in the property only came to light after FORA used the Preston Park property as security for a $19 million loan that FORA had no means of repaying except through the sale of the property. It was this loan and the fact that FORA could not identify a repayment source other than the sale of the property that caused Marina to object to FORA's actions. FORA also points to the Abronsby housing project as evidence that Marina agreed it was obligated to buy out FORA's interest in Preston Park. The transaction with regard to Abronsby, however, is indistinguishable from the current situation at Preston Park. Marina has never disputed that if any property at Fort Ord is sold to a third party, the city is obligated to share any sale proceeds with FORA. The Abronsby property was transferred to the city by FORA at no cost. The city then transferred the property to a nonprofit corporation controlled by the city in order to allow both the city and FORA to obtain upfront funds based on the long-term lease revenues from the property through the sale of lease revenue bonds. The transfer of Abronsby to the nonprofit corporation triggered the requirement to buy out FORA's interest by sharing with FORA 50% of the sale proceeds. The city has always acknowledged that if it were to dispose of Preston Park in a similar manner, it would be obligated to comply with the implementation agreement and share with FORA 50% of any sale proceeds. FORA also states that Marina's representatives consented to and encouraged the Rebel Bank loan, and on this basis, FORA proceeded to enter into the Rebel Bank loan. This grossly misstates the facts surrounding the Rebel Bank loan. First and foremost, the City of Marina never consented to the Rebel Bank loan. FORA attempts to characterize the votes of the Marina appointed representatives to the FORA board as the city's consent to actions. 4 board members vote on 4 board issues in their capacity as 4 board members, taking actions that they believe are in the best interest of FORA. These actions cannot be considered to demonstrate consent of the member jurisdictions, since only a vote of the council or governing board of each jurisdiction can be deemed consent of that jurisdiction. Although 4 board members may have dual loyalties, when acting as 4 board members, they have a fiduciary obligation to FORA first and foremost. The Marina representatives to the board acted in that capacity when voting with regard to the Rebel Bank loan and any other actions taken about Preston Park. It should also be noted that
30 seconds.
Thank you. 4 representatives to the FORA board. Only one of Marina's representatives was present at the meeting, voted in favor of the resolution approving the Rebel Bank loan, only after being assured that certain conditions would be met protecting Marina's interest in the Preston Park property. However, shortly after the FORA board approval, Mr. Hulamard executed the Rebel Bank loan documents, which contained none of those protections or assurances. In fact, the loan documents contain language specifically subordinating the implementation agreement to
Your
the
time is up.
loan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Bruce Delgado. The loan documents contain language specifically subordinating the implementation agreement to the loan and thereby put the city's interests in Preston Park property at risk. Although the loan documents had been signed and recorded, Mr. Hulamart continued to exchange emails with the City of Marina staff regarding appropriate language to be included in the loan documents that had already been executed unbeknownst to Marina. Thus, the city's property interest in Preston Park has been encumbered by that loan when we didn't even know the loan was being executed. So we were negotiating with FORA what should be in the loan before we could approve of it, and the loan had already been executed sort of secretly without our knowledge. Months later, we found out that we were hoodwinked and we were talking about what would go in the loan when in fact the loan had already been executed. The FORA press release of a couple days ago states the Marina's refusal to purchase FORA's 50% interest in Preston Park, along with the loss of redevelopment funding, has resulted in a significant loss of funding to FORA. The reality is FORA continues to receive the same amount of tax increment it received from local jurisdictions prior to dissolution of redevelopment agencies, and in fact projects projects as part of the CIP increases in funding each year. The brunt of the impact of redevelopment dissolution has fallen on us, the local jurisdictions, that relied upon that tax increment. The most recent budget prepared by FORA and presented to your board just 2 weeks ago shows an increase in revenues to FORA from property taxes with a projected total amount of $1.5 million as opposed to $1.3 million in the prior year's budget. Your proposed resolution before you today states that the retention of the property would not cause significant hardship to Marina, and goes on to state that Marina has never opposed the sale of the property based on our financial well-being. Well, Marina has always considered its own financial well-being with regard to the loan status of Preston Park. Although a sale of the property would result in a significant one-time source of funds, Marina has sought to retain the property in order to preserve the long-term revenue stream. We've had significant takeaways from the states. We don't need another state-created agency to further take away a $1.75 million sustainable revenue stream in favor of a balloon payment to us of $30 million. We've analyzed investing any such one-time money with the goal of preserving the current revenue stream we have, but with today's investments rates, it would not be possible, and therefore we would be losing a significant sustainable revenue stream. We are not like FORA in this for the short term. We are looking at decades or
30
centuries.
seconds.
In summary, FORA attempts to point to Marina as the cause of potential foreclosure. However, FORA fails to mention that litigation was ever filed by Marina. Before that happened, Marina did offer to resolve its disagreement by putting Preston Park property on the market with Marina having a right of first refusal. FORA rejected the offer apparently because FORA wanted to have a guaranteed purchase price rather than take a chance what the market would actually pay. Marina then brought the current litigation only after FORA attempted to sell the property and told Marina that they could sell Preston Park on Craigslist next Friday if they wanted to. So we don't want to be under that high-risk vulnerability environment, so that is why we would like to have title to stop the aggressive behavior of FORA, as you can see, that has encumbered our 50% value in this very valuable piece of property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to the Marina delegation. In the past, we've had folks that we normally have a 3-minute time period because otherwise we'd be here all night. And the Marina delegation figured out a way to get their word in there using a team approach, and you're to be congratulated for your thoughtful team approach and spirit. Next speaker, please.
Thank you. Marina is far more clever than you think. FORA's conduct is becoming more and more blatantly cynical and villainous. You poll your members to see who can come to a special meeting, and then ascertaining that Marina members are already engaged, you rush to agendize the sale of Preston Park, an important issue that should be in a regular meeting. This false urgency was used to pull Councilmember O'Connell from Colorado and make Councilmember Morton have to cancel a long-standing medical appointment. This is a hostile use of administrative power to punish Marina, and it is rude. This agenda item is not just low tricks, it's absurd. FORA and Marina are in litigation. You would show such contempt of the legal process as to sell Preston Park out from under the judge's nose? I think not. The intent of this agenda item is to intimidate a member who has dared stand up for its interests, Marina, as its civic leaders are morally obligated to do. And as this item demonstrates, the intent of FORA is to demonize Marina as an enemy and an alien within your ranks. The only possible way this makes sense as an agenda item is to frighten and bully Marina. Legally, it's ridiculous. Every land recipient should be aware that you could be in the position that Marina is in now if FORA has not transferred your land to you already. Because FORA is asserting the right and asking you to agree that it has the right to sell any property in its possession without passing it to the intended recipient at below market value if necessary. If you own Parker Flat, Seaside East, area south of Giggling, I would weigh whether my ultimate loyalty is to FORA or to my people, and I wouldn't swallow this poison pill for FORA's sake. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next public speaker.
Thank you. My name is Jason Campbell, a resident of Seaside. If FORA is running short on fees, I would recommend you stop lowering developers' fees. I mean, that's the first thing. If you need the money, stop lowering those fees. Here's a solution for you on that foreclosure. Considering that what's written in the packet, FORA is allowed to sell property at below market value, I propose FORA sell its share of Preston Park for $18 million and pay off the loan and sell it to Marina. I think the problem will be solved right there. No foreclosure, and that this is a mess of FORA's making. So I just want to offer you a possible out. I want everyone to be aware of the precedent that this would set if you pass this. Like Margaret before me said, a lot of jurisdictions have property coming to them from Fort Ord or already have it transferred. And I mean, especially Monterey, Marina, the county, and Delray Oaks, and of course Seaside. It's very close to me. If this will set a very dangerous precedent if you vote yes to allow FORA to take that land back. I also got to say there's a interesting claim in this that there's some sort of mutual understanding between Marina and FORA. I mean, that seems like a really vague term, mutual understanding. I haven't seen any documentation saying that there's an agreement that Marina was going to sell that. It would have been nice if it was in the packet. And then when you look at the wording in the very next item you guys are going to be considering, FORA sets a completely different standard for what it can do. It backs out of a $17 million agreement because it was never quote unquote memorialized. That's a distinctly different standard. So I really think if there's no memorialization, then I don't even know where you're coming from with this mutual understanding. So again, I warn the other jurisdictions, you never know when FORA is going to come back to you with this. FORA may find it convenient to take your land away from you and sell it. I mean, that's what they're saying, convenient. And this process is how they will do it. So I don't know how you will vote in the future if FORA does that. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next public speaker.
Michael Salerno. I'm speaking as a resident of Marina. I'd like to thank my representatives for showing up today. That was very thoughtful. Thank you. I'd like to start by saying all this is in the context of the Preston Park loan. And at the last meeting, we had a call for a unanimous vote for extension. The board was calling for extension of the loan. I think what's really missing here today, we got a little bit of an update, but where exactly those negotiations stand, I know one of the aspects was an appraisal of the property. So a big question is, what happened with that appraisal? Did the property appraise at $60 million or did it appraise at $40 million? It's a big difference. Big question there. In terms of the government code, I looked it up. It's unfortunate it wasn't included in the packet for the public to see, but the premise was that the action wouldn't cause financial hardship to Marina. I think we can all imagine there's a number of instances where this action would cause financial hardship to Marina. Obviously, they would miss out on the annuity payments of the rent over time. It's also analogous to being forced to sell your house in the down market. For example, Preston Park could be worth much more in a few years. Marina would miss out on that. If it was sold to a private entity, that entity could change the use of Preston Park completely, and Marina wouldn't receive any financial benefit. Finally, what I'd like to comment on, like my colleagues did, is the precedent of what's going on here. So if the members of Seaside, the county, and Marina Monterey, the jurisdictions with property that FORA still has title to, the precedent where FORA can retain the property and sell it if they get in a financial bind. I would really like you guys to consider that when you're voting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next public speaker, please.
You guys are ahead of schedule today. Okay, so everybody knows Sid Williams, resident of Marina, and I'd like to comment on this in that FORA was established to provide for the reuse of the former Fort Ord in accordance with a regional concept. And a brief look at what has occurred shows that this is what it has done. General Jim Moore Boulevard, Imjin Parkway, East Garrison, and the Dunes Project have all benefited specific jurisdictions and economic redevelopment. The loan encumbering Preston Park will lead to foreclosure if not repaid. That loan was secured with the consent of the City of Marina. If foreclosed, who would then end up with Preston Park? Unknown. Marina could purchase the property at 50% of its value, or FORA could sell the property for 100% and give Marina half. If Marina is given Preston Park for free, then who will repay the loan? From what monies? The continuation of FORA until its sunset is important for many reasons and for many jurisdictions. Those jurisdictions do not have the funds to implement the capital improvement program and will not have such funds anytime soon, if ever. And there would be no regional voice to guide the program. FORA has been a valued partner for the region in general and for local veterans, among others, specifically by creating infrastructure and innovative programs to expedite and further construction of the new VA DOD clinic and the Veteran Cemetery. As a citizen of Marina, I would like to support my city. As a regionalist and a veteran, I would like to support FORA. To give Preston Park to Marina for free could do harm to the Veterans Clinic and more specifically to the Veterans Cemetery. I must therefore urge that the board support the resolution before you today to allow FORA to continue to use Preston Park.
Thank you, sir. Any other public speakers? Seeing none, public comment periods closed. Back to the board. Entertain a motion, please.
I'll move the approval of the resolution.
We
And
have
on the second, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Rubio, a second by Supervisor Potter. Back to Mayor Rubio for comment.
Yes, I was listening to the speakers, and they were talking about setting a precedent. This is something that's already in state law, so it's not something new that's being introduced, or the concept. And as far as the caution to the cities about FORA can come and take our lands, we're not in an agreement with FORA. We haven't engaged in a loan agreement with FORA. The issue for the city of Seaside falls squarely on obligations of FORA to the whole area, to the whole region. FORA isn't a third person. It's all the jurisdictions. And we all receive benefit from the capital improvement plan, from the fees that are collected, and from the proceeds of these loan agreements. So we are anticipating that these proceeds will take care of the blight in our city. That will enable us to enhance the entryway to CSUMB and enable them to attract more partners. The issue for us is also economic development. Without that blight removal, we cannot move forward. So it's essential to us that each member jurisdiction stand up to its obligations and its commitments. That's only the right thing to do. Issues with Marina will be settled by a court, but this is the right thing to do today. The standards have been met regarding the two items necessary to implement this resolution, and I believe that we should support the resolution and pass it. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, call for roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Beach,
Yes.
Supervisor Calcagno, Chair Edelin,
Aye.
Mayor Gunter, Councilmember Lucius, Councilmember Morton, Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell, Mayor Pro Tem Oglesby, Mayor Pendergrass, Supervisor Potter, Mayor Rubio,
Yes.
Councilmember Selfridge,
Yes.
Chair Edelin, the motion passes.
Motion passes, but it will be brought back before the next meeting of this board for a second vote, as is our procedure. Okay, next item on the agenda. Marina Coast Water District fiscal year 2014-15 ORD community budget presentation. Steve, I believe you're taking the lead on this.
Members of the board, I'm just going to give a brief overview of why the FORA board is being asked to take up this issue that is brought before you by another agency, the Marina Coast Water District. The background to this process, next slide, is that in 1997, the FORA board selected Marina Coast Water District as the Fort Ord water wastewater purveyor. An RFP had been issued for that, and they were the winning bidder. In 1998, a facilities agreement was put together which established the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee, which gives recommendations to this board and reviews proposed budgets from the Marina Coast Water District, and also requires board approval, i.e. FORA board approval, of the Marina Coast Water District ORD area budget, also known as a compensation plan. In November of 2001, Marina Coast Water District actually received the system, all the infrastructure of the system, through a no-cost EDC transfer. So they are actually the owner of the plant and facilities. Each year, the Marina Coast Water District and FORA staff work with the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee to review the ORD budget and related issues, and this year was no exception. They met 6 times in various permutations, sometimes joint meetings with your administrative committee, and at other times with the WWOC itself. And they made a number of suggestions and improvements to the document that have been reflected in what you see before you today. Next slide. The recent history of this issue, it was a fairly smooth process for a period of years, and then as I think all of you know, during the last several years, this board has granted little or no increases to the rates and charges requested by the Marina Coast Water District. The reasons for that are documented and included in both the staff report and previous documentation, so I won't get into too much detail. But currently, the reserves and the ability of the district to make necessary capital improvements are beginning to suffer under stress. And we've also been hindered in making progress regarding implementation of the water augmentation program. So we're beginning to have some concern in that area. Among the major issues that this board dealt with over the last few years and documented had to do with progress being made on the LAFCO annexation and the representation of all ratepayers. The regional desal issue, the former regional desal program, has been at least an effort has been made to decouple that from the Marina Coast Water District budget so that it is not reflected in the operating or capital sides of this program. And a number of other issues that have come up over the years that we believe progress has been made, and that perhaps not all issues have been resolved, and it's clear that we can continue to work on them as we go forward during the course of the year, but should not get in the way of an action being taken tonight. Also, it's been mentioned that I guess I should just sort of break out for you that you have an operating side, and that is the direction to which the rates are applied, and then you have a capital side, which is funded by the so-called capacity charges. And on the capacity charge side, there have been some questions asked about magnitudes. I'll just take the water side of it as an example. On the water side, the current capacity charge is at around 5,500. The original draft documents that began to be circulated to WWOC earlier in the year were looking at as much of an increase as up to 15,000 on the water side of the capital program. And what MCWD has done, I think rightly so, is they hired a engineering firm, Carollo and Associates, who have done a rate study and a full analysis of the program, and they've managed to drop those capacity charges down to somewhere in the 8,000 range, which includes being able to cover what used to be covered by a line item in the FORA CIP known as the voluntary contribution. So a lot of good work has been done in order to, I think, right-size their program. They will make a full budget presentation in a minute or two and can get into more detail about all aspects of the budget. The staff recommendation from the FORA side is to approve the fiscal year 2014-15 MCWD Board community budget, and if the board so desires, to direct MCWD to present water augmentation options at a near future FORA board meeting. And of course, staff is available to answer any questions after the presentation by MCWD.
Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Chair Edlin, members of the board. We're going to wait to load up my presentation, and we'll go from there. While it's loading, I'd like to thank the FORA board for being here today and thank the public members and my staff, FORA staff, and the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee. We've been working hard for the past few months to get this down to this point, so I'm very happy about that. I want to start by saying that I'm here to talk to you for a few minutes, and then I'm going to turn it over to Piers Razum, who is our consultant with Carollo Engineering, and he's going to provide information to you for a few minutes, and then afterwards I will become your audience. I'm also here today to listen to you and your concerns. This budget is not perfect. It doesn't solve all of our problems. It's a start. We conducted a 5-year study to get to this point, and a rate study, and this budget reflects that rate study, and it's a starting process so that we can move forward on tackling the issues of augmentation, forward on tackling the issues of annexation. And we are hopeful that we can move forward, and I'm hopeful for your support today in that regard. As Steve said, we have met a number of times with the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee and the Joint Admin Committee. Starting on February 27th, we did provide the compensation plan to FORA, and since that time we have met. Ending on May 21st, and the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee did not make any recommendations on moving the budget forward to you today. So we thank them for their efforts, and we are hopeful that today we can build on the efforts that were done and move forward in that regard. Next step. Slide. The compensation plan before you today funds ongoing operation and maintenance of the district system in Fort Ord. It also funds existing debt and coverage requirements for that debt. It is for lack of a better word, it is a Toyota Prius of a budget. It is not a Cadillac Escalade. It is a budget that is going to get us going in the right direction, but it's not an exotic budget, and it's not overly built. It does provide a minimal pay-go funding options for their CIP programs, and it doesn't cover all of the CIP needs of the Fort Ord community, and we'll show that up in a little bit later. This budget this year does require borrowing money. The operation and maintenance portions of this budget, we are not collecting enough revenue to cover that cost, and we still need to borrow money. In the past, we've been borrowing money from reserves. We are out of reserves. So what the district is proposing to do is borrow the money from the Central Marina Water Cost Center to cover us for this year. And we'll discuss later on how we are going to move out of that realm and make the Ord community self-sufficient in that regard on water and wastewater. We're looking at a 10% revenue increase and 4% sewer revenue increase, 10% for water, 4% for sewer. What we've tried to do during the 5-year rate study is we've tried to balance out the revenue, 10% increases per year, and tried to level the playing field to give people an opportunity to plan ahead. We didn't want to have spikes of 20% one year going down to 8%, going up to 16%. We wanted to make that as level as we could, and we're trying in that regard to balance the budget so that income meets costs and still plan ahead and allow other people to plan ahead as well. So we're going to talk about percentages later on, but what it really boils down to is about a $12.37 increase on the water side and about a $1.23 increase on the sewer side for a typical 13-unit or 1,300 cubic foot bill. Next slide, please. A little bit of facility background. We have about 3,000 accounts in the Ord community, 200 miles of water, 100 miles of sewer. We've got a number of wells and lift stations. The total value of the capital facilities on the Ord community is about $140 million. If we assume an average life of all of those assets of about 47 years, that works out to about $3 million a year that the district should be gathering to cover the replacement of the existing assets. That's $3 million a year that we should be either putting in the ground or in the bank for future projects. To date, we've been averaging about $300,000 a year. We're averaging about 10% of what we really should be putting away to cover the cost of the capital facilities and replacement of the existing infrastructure. And that $3 million covers about $970 a year per account. So that is the numbers in that regard. Next slide, please. So then the question becomes, which is out there, it's kind of an elephant in the room, what about the regional project? What did that do? So the district has about $12 million out of reserves that we've done for the regional project. That was a decision we made years ago, back when everybody was gung-ho, greatest thing since sliced bread. Everybody's going, this is regional project's going to make us whole. It's going to give us the augmentation of water we need. How do we fund that project? We fund it out of reserves. Capital projects are funded out of reserves. We also had a commitment to get that money back once the funding for the project specific was in place. Obviously, that didn't happen. But if we remember on the last slide, we should be putting about $3 million a year away. The $12 million we used on the regional project equates to about 4 years of CIP work. So it's not a huge, significant dent in our CIP project list. We've gone through the CIP list and we've deferred projects for other reasons, not just because of the regional project. And that is just one more effect on deferring capital projects. We think we're pretty confident in being able to get those projects back online. We're also pretty confident that we'll be able to recover the $12 million, and we'll be able to put that back in reserves for the capital projects. The regional project does not impact this budget. It has no impact on this budget simply because the operation and maintenance of the facilities on the Ord community, we aren't making enough revenue to cover the operation costs anyway. We need to raise rates regardless of the regional project because we're still not making our bills. We are still borrowing money to cover the day-to-day operation. Next slide, please. We're not alone in this regard. I think everybody in this room recognizes that all utilities, all cities are trying to find a way to provide services at a reasonable cost, and it's getting harder and harder. This sheet is taken from the City of Marina's discussion on roading, road pavement, and what is an acceptable level of road surface requirements, a CPI index, or not CPI, but an index of what level of service is available for the roads. And it's the bullet point up on the left-hand side, taking care of streets cost less than deferring and rebuilding, is true for all utilities. taking care of our facilities now is going to be less than having to replace or rebuild them. And that's true for streets, that's true for pipelines. And we can save millions of dollars by by having a budget that takes care of those facilities now. Another thing that I deal with that cities don't have to for roadways, pipelines are buried. You don't see them. We don't drive over the pipelines on a daily basis and go, whoa, that needs to be repaired. We don't see it until it breaks. And that's kind of the problem of maintenance on pipelines. Is really important because you can't see it deteriorate. You have to guess and gauge and maintain it on a long-term basis without actually being able to sit there and poke at it and say that needs to be taken care of. Another thing, utilities, water utilities in particular, we don't have the luxury of trying to determine, you know, is a 60 acceptable, is a grade of level C acceptable for the pipelines like we do for roadways. Water utilities are binary. It is an on or off situation. I don't get to determine a level of service. I have to provide water to the community, wholesome, clean water, 24/7, 365. That is a requirement. So I go from 0 to 100 and back to 0. And the funds in this budget help us maintain 100%. It ensures that we can provide 100% water 24/7, 365. Next slide, please. There is a significant impact for deferred maintenance and capital replacement. Okay, if we defer maintenance and we push it off, we could decrease the asset life cycle of our facilities by about a third. We could lose approximately 12, 13 years off of that 47-year life cycle cost for those facilities out there. And that would actually increase our annual depreciation to $4.5 million versus $3 million, another $1.5 million. And that would add roughly $500 to the individual ratepayers' cost for those facilities. We go from about $1,000 to $1,450. That's important. So we want to make sure we're maintaining the system. This budget helps us, assures us that we're going to be able to maintain the system. Next slide. Rate increases are unfortunately a fact of life. We are not alone in that regard. We want to recognize that, and we are assured that everybody has their rates going up. Cost of power is going up, and power is a main component of our operating budget. And Cal State Monterey Bay on their student housing website even states that students, you should plan ahead for a 5% increase in housing costs on a monthly basis. So this is not unique to Marina Coast Water District. Everybody has to share that same problem on how do we provide service at the best cost, keep the rates down as low as possible. Everybody's in that same boat. Next slide. Discussions at the Wastewater Oversight Committee involved what are we doing, should the district connect its budget to the CPI index. CPI index, for those of you that don't know, is an aggregate of services and utilities and goods that the government uses to determine inflation and things like that. So what we did is we took out the CPI index for water and sewerage maintenance and compared it to what we're proposing. And if you look at the slide in front of you, you'll see the green-gray bars represent what would happen if we had raised our rates equal to the CPI water wastewater maintenance components. And you'll see that based on that in the last 3 years, we would actually be about right where we are proposing today. So if we had actually tied our rates to the CPI index 3 years ago, we would still be in the same place we are now. Next slide, please. We didn't do that. We haven't raised rates per the CPI. We haven't raised rates per recommended based on the studies. What we've done instead is we've actually borrowed the money. We borrowed the money from our reserves. That is not a good idea. What you'll see is that our operating reserve target in the red line on the slide there is above, significantly above, on 2013-14, what our reserves are. We've borrowed from reserves to continue our day-to-day operations, which is a very bad practice, and I'll show you a little bit maybe in the next slide, but we are still borrowing money with this budget in front of you today for this year. We do have a plan, 5-year plan, to help us out in that regard, but this year we are still basically borrowing money to pay the grocery bills on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. Hey, here it is. So this is just illustrative. This is not tied to any numbers in our budget at all, but I just wanted to get this graph out here to show you why it's bad to borrow your reserves to fund day-to-day operations. If we started it in year 1 and we drew down reserves instead of increasing rates by 5%, in year 6 we would be out of reserves, we would not be able to borrow any more money from ourselves, and we would be required to raise rates 28%, a pretty significant amount. It is a bad idea to borrow out of your retirement account to pay for the groceries. That account, the reserve account there, are necessary for funding big projects like regional desalination project, large CIP projects, and to cover us to make sure we can do things for rainy day options. Next slide, please. All right. That's the end of my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Pierce Rosem. He is with Carollo. He was the one responsible for the rate study, 5-year rate study. So I want to thank you very much. I'll be coming back up after Pierce to make some closing comments and open it up to Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Again, as an introduction, I'm Pierce Rosem with Carollo Engineers. Back in September of 2012, we were hired by the district to do a financial plan and rate study. As Brian mentioned, the difference between the compensation plan and the financial study is we took a 5 to 10 year financial outlook. And the reason we do that is because there's certain things you can smooth over 10 years or 5 years that you can't do in a simple singular budget. So that was one objective, is try to look long term and see how we can get to where we need to be rather than in one fell swoop, do it over approximately 5 years. So the rate study would identify revenue requirements, and revenue requirements is basically how much revenue do you need to cover your day-to-day operations and costs. So that was the first piece, was identify how much we need to take in. The second piece was to do a cost of service analysis. So not only taking a look at how much revenue we need to collect, but how do we collect that from different users. And the final piece of that was we have some mandates in terms of the state's 20 by 20 requirement that needs to promote conservation. So one of the big pieces of this was how does the rate structure encourage conservation. Next slide, please. So with that, this was done in 3 pieces, and feel free to click through a couple times. So the first piece is the revenue requirements. The next piece is the cost of service analysis. And then again, the next piece is the rate design. So if you click through, just go ahead 3 more times. 1 more time. And again. So looking at the pieces, it's up there on the screen, but like I said, the first piece is to identify the revenue needs. That's taking a look at, are your revenues currently adequate to cover your expenses? And as you've been using reserves, the answer is no. The second piece is the cost of service that allocates that revenue requirements to the various customer components, whether it's a fixed charge or a variable charge. So that gets into the rate design. How are you going to collect this? And different agencies do this. It depends on some of those objectives. But the idea here is to collect some portion on a monthly charge regardless of consumption, and then have the rest based on a variable charge based on your actual usage. Next slide, please. So that's the general process. There's a lot of kind of moving pieces and nuances that create competing objectives. So the first piece is the rate design. If we just look at that, we've got cost of service. Prop 218, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, basically says you can't charge different groups of customers differently. It has to be cost-based rates. Again, conservation objectives, and then affordability is an important consideration. From the agency's perspective, we've got financial stability. So by financial stability, we say, is that revenue predictable? Weather's a variable that we have to contend with. Every water agency has to contend with that. As you're predicting conservation, how much revenue is going to come in from your variable charge, how much is going to come in from your fixed charges. So trying to balance that, and again, balancing that with your rate design. And then the third piece is the capital component. As Brian mentioned, water, wastewater is heavily infrastructure needs. There's a lot of capital there. So how do we have short-term needs versus long-term needs, being proactive versus reactive in our approach of funding those things. Next slide, please. So one of the big components here and the future needs is the the 5-year CIP. Roughly, we have about $20 million for the Ord water and slightly less than that for the Ord sewer community. Next slide, please. So as we're talking about the revenue requirements, we look at two different things. First, what is your revenue need? Click, please. So here for Ord water, again, about that $20 million number. Click, please. Looking at it, can we fund with cash or reserves? And the answer is no. We don't have, in that 5-year period, we can only muster up about $6 million with the proposed rates. So cash funding only is not an option. What we have to go to is, next slide please, is debt. Debt is necessary in order to fund that full identified capital improvement plan. And so over the course of those 5 years, there is enough capacity in those revenues and those rates to debt fund those capital needs. Looking at the sewer side, next slide please, same thing, roughly $17 million worth of capital needs. Cash here in this situation, again, doesn't fund it enough, but if we click one more time, neither does debt. So in this situation, the 5-year plan, we don't get there. Even with the proposed rate increases on the sewer side, we don't fully fund the identified 5-year CIP. Next slide, please. We bring up debt, and that's necessary to fund the capital programs. But if we look at the existing debt that the agency has, rate increases are necessary in order to fund existing debt requirements. And so if you look at the graph, and I'll just focus on the blue diamonds and the blue line, that's your senior debt. So every time you issue debt, the bank requires you to have a certain coverage requirement. And that coverage requirement is 1.25 times your operating costs. So we have to have enough revenue in order to cover your day-to-day operations by 25% extra. So in the first couple years, we hit those targets without increases. Looking forward, as those expenses continue to climb, we fail to meet those obligations. Now this is looking purely from an Ord water perspective. This is Ord water's debt obligations. Luckily, the debt service can be combined with all the 4 cost centers, so your legal mandate is covered, but in terms of a cost of service, equity component share, these rates would fail to meet that obligation. Next slide, please. In addition to that, looking at the revenue requirements, the first piece is, do your revenues cover your expenditures? So the expenditures are that red bar, the red bars. Your revenues, that blue line going across. And what we see is, for almost every year, you've got to borrow from reserves in order to make up that difference. That's not an option, especially as we're out of reserves. Furthermore, the next slide. Part of the facilities agreement, as has been mentioned, specifically states that MCWD will recover all of its direct, indirect, short, long-term costs of furnishing the facilities to the service area. So with that understanding of we're not hitting our targets, we're not covering our costs, how do we get there? We made a revenue recommendation. And the next slide shows these recommendations. We have a gradual increase, provide financial stability, the ability to issue new debt to fund those capital reinvestment. Now, I say gradual, even though that line is consistent. What we're trying to prevent is, because your costs fluctuate, we don't want your revenues to match that perfectly. We want to say we're going to under-collect in the first 2 years. So FY13-14, FY14-15, we're still under collecting, so we're borrowing from reserves in those years. 15-16, 16-17, and so on, those reserves start getting built back up. So the next slide, in terms of reserves, what's necessary? What's the target? So those gradual increases enables a rebuilding of these reserves. So the little triangle there that you see is the operating target. and this is pretty consistent with most agencies. It's 180 days of operating, so that means you could, without any revenue, run for 180 days. That target currently, as we showed before, you're only meeting those obligations because you're borrowing money. In the first couple of years, what you see up until 2017-18, this plan, as it was done in the study, says that you're going to get there in year 5. The rate recommendations have not been approved as they were in the study, so we're actually a little bit further behind the curve, as the budget or the compensation plan shows. That operating number for 14-15 is 0, not the couple 100,000, 500,000 that it shows in this graphic. So, next slide, please. What that boils down to is, with those revenue increases, keeping this existing rate structure. No changes to the rate structure were made, but these are the rates. In the next slide, we show what that means to a typical customer. There's a lot of variance in different customers, but looking at your most common customer is using 13 units of water. That's a healthy amount of water. The existing charge is about $80, and with the increases, that would take that up to $93.78. So the water component of that is $12.37. The sewer component is $1.23. Next slide, please. Comparisons are always helpful in terms of what's my neighbor paying for, but in terms of really comparing cost of service and whether it's appropriate, it's kind of apples and oranges. So take this with a grain of salt. Also, with the rate comparisons, it really dramatically changes based on consumption levels. Cal-Am, for example, has a very low fixed meter charge, but a very high commodity charge. So that means each gallon of water you're using costs you a lot more at Cal-Am than it does in Marina, but Marina you're going to be paying more for that strict level of service, that monthly charge, than you would at Cal-Am. Next comparison is for the sewer side. One more slide. Oh, so this is the wastewater rate comparison. As we see, again, it varies between the different jurisdictions. And then the next slide, please. So that's the monthly charges. That's what you pay for your actual monthly commodity rate. The capacity fees were a second component that we looked at. Next slide, please. So the capacity charge pays for a new development or a user's buy-in to the existing infrastructure and whatever infrastructure is necessary to support that development. So with that, the first piece is, what are you buying into? That's the replacement cost. So RCMLD is replacement cost new minus depreciation. The second piece is your future costs. What do you need to support that new development? Not only their share of the existing system, but their future. And then all of those costs are then divided by existing and future customers. So that's the methodology in a nutshell. If we go to the next slide, here's a little bit more of the details behind the scenes. The current asset values were escalated to today's replacement cost. What does it cost to replace that system new? Now, we've taken out the conveyed system. So what Steve mentioned in 2001, the system was conveyed at 0 cost. All those assets are not included in the buy-in fee. We've included applicable reserves and other assets. We've taken out depreciation, understanding that you're not buying a new car. You're buying into the system that's been aged. And then we take out debt principal, because that's going to be on the monthly charges. We've included the future capital, and as you know, the denominator there is the meter equivalent projection, which is based on the urban water management plan or the full growth of the system. that boils down to the next slide, the system capacity charges. As Steve mentioned, the existing is about $57.50 for water, $21.50 for sewer. Now the one caveat there is board water has a $20 monthly surcharge. So that's an additional cost on the monthly charges, and then $5 surcharge monthly on the ORD sewer. The proposed methodology gets rid of the surcharges and says you're paying in one time. You're buying in full and committed. It's not a down payment and then a monthly payment. It's just one full payment. And so the proposed increase would be to $8,000 for a one-time charge, and then ORD sewer goes to $33.22. So with that, that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll throw it back to Brian for closing remarks. Thank you.
One more slide, please. Perfect. This budget is a start, a fresh beginning. It is an opportunity for us to make the ORD community whole regarding water and wastewater in a long-range plan. I'm seeking your support for this budget today. I'm interested in your input. I know you have received input through letters and possibly emails from a number of residents and interested parties in the community. This is the cost of service. This is reality. And I recognize that there are subsets of the ORD community that are having trouble meeting their monthly obligations, their monthly bills for water and wastewater. I am open to any solutions to helping those subsets of the ORD community out. I'm willing to sit down and listen to anyone who has some ideas on how to make that happen, but it doesn't change the fact that to provide water 24/7, 365, this is what it costs. So with that, I thank you very much. I look forward to your comments, and I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, thank you for the very professional presentation. Notwithstanding any specific comments that board members or the public might have on any aspects of the rate charges or whatever, this is probably the best presentation that Marina Coast has given to this board in many, many years, and we appreciate the work you put into it. Okay, let's start off with board members. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. I must say, though, that looking to higher ed it's a poor benchmark for cost structure, because our price index exceeds the healthcare industry, so we're probably the worst as a whole. I couldn't help but notice that the proposed increase rate over the years is higher than the overall inflation in the economy, either CPI overall or the GMP deflator. And as we know, the overall inflation rate is a mix of higher end and higher than average and lower than average inflationary rates, depending on the sector. And typically, labor-intensive service industries are the ones that have the higher overall inflation rate, because they can't innovate and improve their productivity very much, because they pretty much have to do things the same way. But capital-intensive industries, as a rule, experience increased productivity over time, and therefore have inflation rates that are lower than average. And so the question I ask is, has the Marina Coast Water District looked at its performance in terms of productivity improvement over time vis-a-vis industry standards?
We have, and we continue to look into productivity. We are, by nature, as a utility, a lean operation. We try and maintain a staff level that matches the needs, and we try and maintain a facility and equipment level that matches the needs of the system at the time it's there. So there really is no big opportunity to reduce our costs in that regard. We don't have engineers hanging on the walls that I can pull down and ditch off to the side there. We have made changes. Just this last year, we lost a really good engineer to another company, and instead of replacing him, we did replace him with another engineer. I replaced him with an engineering technician. So we are making efforts in that regard to keep our costs down and trying to do an operational evaluation. It's an ongoing process. In regards to not over the next 5 years, maintaining a CPI or even an ENR cost index match. We're playing catch up. We're trying to cover our operational costs, which we haven't been, which is a huge impact to us. And so we're trying to get caught up so that we can actually accomplish the things we need to do to make the Ord community successful.
Other questions by board members? Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Lucius.
Actually, through the chair, I have two questions. And the first is on the chart that's on page 22 of our agenda packet. It's on page 7 of the Marina Coast Water District report. I was just confused by the last two columns. There's one column that is called adopted versus proposed percentage change, and then there's one column called proposed versus estimated percentage change. And the numbers in those columns differ greatly. So for example, on the capacity charge, which is row B, it shows a 3,744% change, but then the next column shows a 23% change. And there are other examples like that as well. So I guess I just wondered if you could explain what those two columns mean.
I'm going to try as best I can, and I will, thank you very much. Try as best as I can to explain those columns and open it up to any panicked, waving of the hands from staff behind me. So we are proposing, or have proposed in the past, if you look at the column 4th column, it says adopted budget Ord community 12, 13, 14. And then we have estimated Ord community wastewater expenses 13, 14. And then we have actual 12, 13 going through there. So adopted versus proposed is the adopted 13, 14 budget versus the proposed 13, 14 budget. Or proposed 14, 15 budget. Thank you. I heard that. So that column, the adopted versus proposed, is what the 13, 14 adopted budget is versus the proposed 14, 15 budget. And that is where you will find that 3,946% increase in expenses. And, no, wait. I'm looking at this differently. Let me check on that. I want to make sure I understand this, so please bear with me. All right, and that is actually, that probably is almost true in regards to development expenses.
The cavalry's right behind you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So further on while we're talking, the proposed versus estimated column is actually exactly that, the proposed budget versus the estimated 13-14 to 14-15 budget. So Kelly, what we're looking at is page 13, which is wastewater system operations.
So is it the last column then that we should be paying attention to in terms of the proposed increases?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And if I may, through the chair, just one other question, which is on the very next page, which shows the comparisons, and it was on the PowerPoint presentation as well that showed the comparisons to Cal-Am, Cal Water, and Marina Coast Water District. I found this chart to be a bit misleading. I don't know what the rates are or should be, but when you look at the spreadsheet above, it does show higher rates and according to the tiers and the breakpoints for Marina Coast Water District. But then when you look at the graph below, it shows Marina Coast Water District lower, or on the low side compared to Seaside and Cal-Am and so forth. So I don't require an explanation unless you have one, but I just think I want to point that out, I guess, for the rest of the board and for the public, because it says this is for illustrative purposes only, and I just think that if someone took a quick glance at that, it could be very misleading and confusing. That's all. Thank you.
Any comments?
I would like to provide a comment to that.
Please.
And as Pierce indicated during the presentation, we tried to take a singular snapshot in time. If somebody was using 1,300 cubic feet or 13 units, this is how it would compare out. Not everybody uses 13 units of water a month. If somebody uses 1 unit or even no units of water a month, the chart's going to be drastically different. So we are just trying to show what an average user on the Ord community would be subject to if they were in a different jurisdiction. Nobody is average.
Chair Edlin,
Yes.
can I add a little light
there's more.
to the spreadsheet in particular that Councilwoman Lucius asked about? The numbers that you see, for instance, under CalAm are the price for each tier per unit that CalAm charges. The prices that you see in that same spreadsheet under Marina Coast Water District are also our prices per unit. The problem is CalAm's unit is 1/10 the size of Marina Coast Water District's unit. So you're paying in the lowest tier, for example, in the Ord community, proposed $2.22 per 100 cubic feet, whereas Delray Oaks, you're paying 30 cents, they're almost 31 cents per 10 cubic feet. So if you want those numbers to match up, you have to multiply the CalAm numbers by 10, or you have to divide ours by 10.
Thank you, Tom.
Point well made.
Yes, Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, I have some questions in regards to the conservation efforts that MCWD is entertaining, because there really haven't been too much to date. If your conservation program is as robust as we'd like to see it, in the rest of the peninsula, we're, pretty strict on water use, and I know that you count 3 dwelling units per acre foot, and we count 4. If you were to get to that, how would that affect your operation budget? And how would it affect this budget if you were to do that? The second question I have is in regards to the CPI. You talk about 47 years is about the life of, the infrastructure in the ground. Recognizing that most of the infrastructure that you inherited or were deeded by the Army, most of that stuff has been in the ground quite some time. What's the percentage of that infrastructure that's already at that point, and what are the plans for building that up and replacing it adequately so that you can provide the service that we need? And the 4 to 5 million a year doesn't seem like that'll be enough to do that, and kind of how long would it take you to catch up to be current right now? I know that you like to stretch it out over years and years and years, but that stuff is going to just keep getting older and older, and pretty soon it's going to fail. The next question is in regards to the CPI as well. There doesn't appear to be any augmentation work being done in the first year of the CPI. When is that anticipated to start? At what, is there any urgency there? I mean, for us, there's a lot of urgency. I know that you talk about we won't be needing water for 15 to 20 years, but that's your schedule. My city schedule may be more aggressive than that. And what are the guarantees that we'll have the water when we need it?
Thank you. Regarding conservation, we do have a desire to increase our conservation efforts, to increase our conservation program. It's going to take us some time to get that into effect, and it will not impact this year's budget. It will have an impact on next year's budget and budgets going forward. The hope is that growth in the Ord community will offset conservation. And actually, that's not only a hope, that's a goal of mine, because the water, the augmentation water that we're looking for the Ord community, conservation can be a part of that portfolio, a strong part of that portfolio. Every water saved is every gallon of water saved is a gallon of water we don't have to find somewhere else. So it's a very valid concept to include conservation as a part of our augmentation portfolio. I don't think anyone's thought about that before. I'm hoping we can have that discussion to move it forward. So conservation, yes. This year, not an impact, because it's going to take us some time to get that going. Next year and years forward, it will have an impact. The hope is that the development of the Ord community will offset the impact of conservation. Regarding the 47 years...
Can I follow up on
Yes,
that,
please.
that point you just made? The development of our communities will provide, you know, some more water for conservation, and that will offset. But if the water's not there, then we won't be able to develop. So that augmentation piece is very critical, and we have thought about, you know, the offset that will free water up, but it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. So we need a little more assurance than that.
Understand, and I was going to get to that in the third point. So I agree with you. You need more assurance than that. That's a very valid point. The 47 years of the infrastructure, we'll go down the list. That is existing infrastructure. We project that we will need to replace the entirety of the existing infrastructure out there within 47 years. A new piece of pipe put into the ground today, PVC pipe, realistically has a design life of close to 100 years, 80, 70, 100 years. So the existing infrastructure needs to be replaced in 47 years. That's directly built into that equation. Once we get that infrastructure replaced, that 47 years will start to creep up. 48, 50, 55. Hopefully we'll get to a lifespan of 60, 70, 80 years in the existing infrastructure out there. But that's going to take some time to do that. So, I mean, realistically, we would need $140 million this year in our reserves to start replacement of the infrastructure immediately, because a lot of that infrastructure out there is past its design life, needs to be replaced.
In regards to that, I was looking for a number or percentage of you know, miles of pipe that may be at that point already. Do you have an established system, maintenance system that identifies those areas of critical need?
We are in the process, and this budget includes an asset management program to do exactly what you're saying, to come up with a determination of the lifespan and the life cycle of the facilities that are out there, and when we need to replace critical infrastructure to make sure service is provided 24/7, 365. Okay, and then the follow-up is the augmentation program. Recognizing everybody's plans are different, recognizing that needs for augmentation water for some communities are approaching much faster and rapidly than other communities. I have been talking about what the entire Ord community as a whole is looking like in terms of their need for new water, new augmentation water. Generally looking at if the Ord community built 400 units a year for the next 30 years, we would then exceed our 6,000 acre foot of groundwater that is built into the contracts. That does not take into account anything regarding saltwater intrusion and how we are trying to get the Ord community off of groundwater. Water Resource Agency is working very hard in that regard, and I'm working with them to make sure that that happens. There's a contractual obligation for the Water Resource Agency to get the Ord community off of groundwater, and we are working with them to make that happen. We are working 11043 permits, perfect example. So this does not include that, getting them off there. This is just strictly new water. 2,400 acre feet is generally the number that gets thrown around. When you, Mr. Rubio, need the water, your city needs the water, it will be there. It's trying to figure out when that happens. If it needs to be there tomorrow, we can make it happen. The problem is, it's going to cost money. And we only have certain limited resources to get that money. We have our ratepayers. So we can borrow the money, put the burden on the ratepayers, or we can develop another alternative program to get the money to build and fund the construction of the desalination plant or whatever plant it's going to take to make it happen. We just need to have the conversation with individual agencies to find out how we're going to make that work. We want to have that conversation. I look forward to that conversation. I'm hopeful that in the interim, the FORA community can develop some sort of allocation sharing, for lack of a better word, so that if the city of Delray Oaks has plans for their water in 8 years, city of Seaside has plans for 3 years from now, somehow we can work out an agreement between the two to help the community, give them time to develop the resources, the funding resources necessary to build the augmentation plant, and only provide the augmentation plant, desalination, river water, whatever it is, when it's absolutely needed for the entire community. Because it's expensive water. roughly about 1,000 gallons or $1,000 an acre foot for well water versus $2,000 to $3,000 for treated water, surface water, or desalinated water. It's a significant hit. And we've got to figure out how we can limit that hit as much as possible for not only existing ratepayers, but for future ratepayers. We want to do it at the right time. And I'm not sure the right time is now, but if you say the right time is now, let's figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, you talk about planning. What we really need to do, I think, if you had a meeting once a year, a joint meeting with the land use jurisdictions and your organization talking about planning, short-term, long-term planning, when our projects are ready to go, when we'll need the water, then you can start looking at your planning at that time. But thus far, we're not having that communication. So once a year communication where we go to your location or whatever, sit down and say, we've got a project, we need water by this date, we anticipate the need of water by that date, and you can promise us and show us timelines, exactly how we're going to get there. I think that would do a lot to alleviate the uneasiness that we have that we may not get the water when these projects come online. Because when the projects come online, we need the water now. We can't hear, well, there's an environmental impact report, we have to apply for CEQA, we need to go through the Coastal Commission. It doesn't work that way. So if we can get set that up between yourself and our staff and the land use jurisdictions, I think it'd go a long ways towards solving our problems.
Chair Edlin, I'll do you one better. I know Steve earlier said that we want to come back and provide an augmentation presentation to this board.
Right.
And I definitely want to do that. I know that is a major shadow hanging over this entire community.
Right.
And I commit to meeting with your staff on a quarterly basis or even a half-a-year basis until we can build up that strength and build up that trust and build up the reliance on each other that we're going to make this happen together.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Other questions by board members? Yes. Councilmember Oglesby.
Two quick comments. I apologize, we haven't met. What is your name?
My name is Brian.
And you are the?
I am the interim general manager.
Okay, perfect. Just two quick things, I guess. First of all, I think the chair said that he would like you and your staff to sit down with the land use jurisdictions and form a better partnership, not FORA. You came back and said you and FORA staff will sit down. I think, we need to catch that distinction, because until we solve that problem, you guys are going to have a problem. You need to work closer with the land use jurisdictions. I'll leave that right where it was.
Point made. Thank you.
Secondly, as the interim general manager, has the board and you been working out or working the issue of providing some type of representation or allowing the Fort community ratepayers the ability to vote on the board?
Yes.
What are you guys doing along
Our
that
board
line?
recently approved a 5-year strategic plan. I think it was even just last month. I think we're still in the month of May. And in that strategic plan, we have committed to dealing with the annexation issue within the next 5 years. We actually have committed to annexing the Ord community within the next 5 years, recognizing that it is not entirely within our control. We are dealing with LAFCO, and we are dealing with the local land use jurisdictions in terms of what the boundaries need to be, what the services need to be. We are committed to making that happen within the 5-year strategic plan, sooner rather than later, but we, the board, committed to that. The district has committed to that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions by board members? Seeing none, let's go out to the public. Any question? Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, I missed you there. Go.
Yeah, just a couple of supplementary comments. Marina Coast has, despite the fact that we typically use 1/3 of an acre foot per equivalent dwelling unit, and on the Monterey Peninsula, the more typical figures about 1/4 of an acre foot per dwelling unit. Marina Coast Water District has had a pretty robust Water Conservation Commission and program in effect for about 20 years. But more important, over in the Ord community, the ability to do state-of-the-art water conservation going forward in the developments isn't something that is completely under Marina Coast Water District's control, because it is the land use jurisdictions that set a lot of the standards that affect water conservation in developments. So we could certainly talk with our Water Conservation Commission to see if it would like to work with some part of FORA, for instance, the Regional Design Guidelines ad hoc committee that you have, to try and ensure that we're well connected at the hip going forward with respect to good water conservation standards. And I mean standards, not guidelines, things that you hold people's feet to the fire when they build on the Ord community. So that's number one. Just a comment on asset management. I didn't want anyone to be left with the impression that, well, we don't know what we own. We do have records. When we took over the Ord Community Infrastructure, the Army handed us stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of pieces of paper purporting to be the as-built designs of the water and wastewater infrastructure, and we have actually found that some of that is accurate. But it's pretty much on paper. We have developed over the years some records that are now in electronic form, but what we don't have is all of that in a nice searchable database where we can reach out and grab tomorrow the answer to Mayor Rubio's question, for example, and be confident that it's within 1 or 2%. But we're headed in that direction. But we've got to take all this old paper information and stuff it into an appropriate information technology. So,
Thank you. Okay, let's go out to the public now, get public questions or comments. Sir.
Thank you, Chair Edelin. Doug Yount, Principal in Applied Development Economics. Just a couple of some additional information that may be helpful for the board to make its decisions, as well as some questions or some additional information that may be needed. First, some outstanding questions. I want to thank Brian Lee and his staff and MCWD and their consultant for spending a significant amount of time with staff of the community, the jurisdictions, with FORA and others, interested parties, developers and so forth, relating to this rate study, putting together slides, presentations, other things, which was very helpful through that process of understanding. But I think there's some outstanding information. A question, first of all. One, I think it would be helpful for the board to understand what the combined and separate water and sewer rates are over the 5-year rate study period, both a dollar amount and percentage change. You have a table in there, but you don't have a nice chart like you do with the others that are provided that really illustrate what the percentage increase is over a 5-year period over the rate study. And that's something that I think would be very helpful to the public and also to the board. Secondly, then, water augmentation. It's my understanding that the voluntary contribution, obviously the portion that was previously voluntary or in the FORA CIP, proposed no longer to be in there, and then over into the MCWD's capacity charge. But my understanding is that the MCWD capacity charge does not include an augmented water project at all. And I think it's something that just needs to be clarified. Is it in the capital side? Is it in the equation that you saw in the capacity charges or not? It sounds like there's a plan coming forward. It sounds like there's some good work that'll come in terms of pulling together. But I think it'd be helpful to know that at this point. Thirdly, the 218 process has been concluded and adopted, the various resolutions, ordinances adopted by MCWD. The question is, can MCWD now unilaterally act to put these new rates in place without any action of the FORA board, or can they just move forward now that the 218 is completed? Secondly, some other important information is that I think it should be noted, it's not currently in the staff report, it was noted at the WWOC that CSUMB, MPC, the Army, Army Housing, Marina Heights Development, East Garrison Development, Dunes, City of Marina, City of Seaside, and a large number of the Seaside Highlands parcel owners all filed a 218 protest on the rates. And if you look at it by usage on W3, I think is a change. 30 seconds?
Time is up.
Oh, sorry. Just saying that it's about 96% by usage and 75% by allocation of a protest under there. And just thought the board should know that information.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. My name is Diana Ingersoll. I'm the Deputy City Manager for Resource Management Services for the City of Seaside. I'd need to clarify in the draft minutes of May 21st of the Joint Admin and Wastewater Oversight Committee. Although they reflect motions that were made, one thing that was not placed in this minutes is it was the consensus of both committees that no recommendation was going to come to be provided to the board at this time regarding this compensation plan. And the reason being is twofold. One is that there were various questions that were raised that both committees did not feel was answered at that time. I do want to thank Brian Lee this afternoon. He did answer some of the questions that were raised this afternoon. However, the committees themselves did not feel that it was sufficient at that time to be answered. Secondly, there are policy decisions that have to be made either by the FORA board or the Marina Coast Water District board that needs, such as the voluntary contribution, before any of these decisions have to be made. And as city staff, we raised a few issues at that time. And one of the issues is that the city of Seaside did submit a protest vote on the proposed rates by Marina Coast Water District. They have decided to combine the protest votes with both cost centers, both Marina and Ord community, which means that the Ord community could not in any way, shape, or form make the 50+1 protest because both cost centers are combined. There were issues regarding the process of the protest hearing, the proper noticing, the proper counting or acknowledgement of votes submitted, and then, of course, as indicated, the combination of the two cost centers. We do have concerns regarding the capacity fee, and I believe CSUMB also raised concerns as to how the methodology was done from 2008 versus 2014. We have questions regarding water augmentation project, which we feel very strongly should be placed in the CIP and should be acknowledged somewhere in their plan. The amounts of reserves and the questions about loans, which we feel is a policy, is does the FORA board make the decision regarding acceptance of that loan in which reserves have been used. As city staff, we also look at different alternatives when it comes to rates, and then of course, containing our cost if we don't have enough revenues coming in. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Margaret Davis, MCWD ratepayer. I question the structure where the increase of revenue is coming from the backs of the ratepayers and not on increased capacity fees. Has that been adequately looked at?
Thank you, ma'am.
Christy Markey with Supervisor Jane Parker's office. She regrets that she can't be here today, but she would be voting against the rate structure as proposed if she were here today, and she wanted to extend her thanks to the folks who worked so hard on this. I know it's a lot of work. It's been very complicated, but her main concern is for many years she has said that the existing ratepayers should not be burdened with the cost of paying for a regional desalination plant, and the existing ratepayers are out of pocket $12 million for the failed regional water supply project. So part of this rate structure would have those reserves replenished by charging the existing ratepayers. Her preference would be that we recalculate the capacity charge to replenish the reserves through the capacity charge. Also recognizing that FORA is in the process of removing the voluntary contribution for the water augmentation project, the capacity charge does need to be increased in order to offset that loss of potential revenue. So the board might want to consider adopting the proposed capacity charge as an interim charge while the numbers can be recalculated and a new capacity charge brought back to the board, say, in the next 3 to 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment?
Good afternoon, Chair Etlin and the board. I'm Don Hofer with Marina Community Partners and the Dunes Development. I want to thank the board, MCWD staff for a lot of hard work, and there's a lot of folks that have been participating in the process along the way. We certainly have been one of them. I'm going to speak a little bit to the fact that the process isn't perfect, and when is it ever, right? I think these guys have done a pretty good job. And that is, in fact, why there's a process, so that as we move forward, things like what Jane Parker's office have just brought to to the attention of the board can be discussed and worked out while allowing the water district or whoever the district might be in the case of a process like this to move forward and continue to provide services that are needed. There are a few issues that we've had in the development community that will take a little bit of time to work through. I'll give you an example of them. One of them is, I think we're working off of an old model that hasn't been updated for some time. And as an example of why that's an issue for us, there's been some discussion here today about how the Ord community uses about 1/3 of an acre-foot of water per year. That might be existing, that might be historic. There's also a state law that requires 20% reduction in water use in new homes by the year 2020. And so the future effects of development, the future effects of implementing the reuse plan for the base, it's a little bit unknown as to really where this is headed, other than we know new development will be using less water, and how that will impact in the future years. The analysis of the budget will be interesting to watch. We'll certainly be part of that process. With that, I don't want to necessarily say that we're supporting a fee increase, but we're supporting a process here. Do we wish that the fee was lower? Absolutely. But we appreciate the process. We appreciate the fact that it's been relatively transparent, and we look forward to better data, better information in years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Betsy Wilson. I work for Mid-Penn Housing Corporation. We own and operate Manzanita Place Apartments, 66 apartment units in East Garrison. A letter was sent to you from Goldfarb Littman Attorneys. Can you confirm that the board members have all received this 5-page letter? Folks have that. So I'm going to speak to a few items in here. There are 3 primary points that I'd like to make. Certainly MCWE staff and their consultants have made a compelling argument for the need to raise money to fund their operations. And our fundamental question is the sources and how that money is going to get raised. So the first point is to conservation. So this table that Councilmember Lucius mentioned is misleading in my opinion. And what I conclude from it is that the Cal-Am rates are actually the conservation rates, and as well as the city of Seaside. 13 HCF is a really, really high amount of water. And so what this is showing is that if you're in Monterey or Delray Oaks or Seaside, you're paying a huge amount of money if you're consuming a huge amount of water. And if you're in MCWD's district, you're not really paying a huge amount of money. You're paying a much higher fixed cost, but you're consuming a lot more water. So I would say that looking at these rates from the point of view of conservation, that could be revisited. That's my sense. And living in Monterey, I can tell you, I am a pretty average household. My bill is nowhere near $145 a month. It's about $60 a month. So I do think that this has been engineered to look a certain way and is misleading. The other 2 points, one is about just cost allocations between the 2 cost centers, Fort Ord and Marina. You have this request for the compensation study, compensation report, but in the actual rate study in Table C, it distributes costs between the 2 districts. And there's no explanation for why the Ord district has twice the cost burden as the Marina district for things like administration. They're about the same number of ratepayers in both districts. Why would it cost $1.5 million to cover the administrative work in Ord and $716,000 in Marina? So I think there's just a fundamental question of how those costs get allocated. And then finally, to the letter, the cost of service is the fundamental test under 218. And as their engineer mentioned, you cannot charge different classes of people, different groups of people differently. So for our tenants who are low income, they can't get a discount. Am I done?
No, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. They can't get a discount because they're low income. But they should be charged based on the cost of service. And what we have out there are meters that are sized for peak capacity to serve a single family home. And our apartment dwellers use half or less of the water of a single family home, but are paying the cost of service of a single family home. So the rate study, the proposed numbers do not comply with the cost of service obligations under 218. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Alan Belinsky. I'm the Housing Development and Property Director for Interim Incorporated. Interim has several housing developments on Fort Ord, Sandy Shores, and Shelter Cove are the name of those, which provide supportive housing for affordable, very low-income people with psychiatric disabilities. In addition, Interim's developing Rock Rose Gardens, which is a new affordable project which will serve 20 additional very low-income tenants and in 21-bedroom apartments. Our main point is that we feel that there is a disparate impact on apartment dwellers and especially on persons living in affordable housing units, and in fact could be in violation of the Fair Housing Act. So our main point here is that these ratepayers are really disproportionately affected by this rate structure, and we're very, very much concerned about that. So we're urging you to reject the proposed rate structure for MCWD and to request that the structure be revised to reflect the size and occupancy of these housing units and actual water consumption. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Catherine Turney. I'm the Executive Officer of the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers. I emailed a letter yesterday. I've been told it was included. Thank you. I'll be very brief. The coalition member agencies have several member agencies who have low-income, affordable housing, homeless programs on Fort Ord, and has spent years and sweat and effort to get those programs up and running, and they're extraordinarily difficult to maintain and sustain. The coalition objects to the proposed increases for various reasons that include a lack of justification for water and sewer surcharges for units built after 2005, a disproportionate effect on apartments due to the requirement of individual meters, and proposed cost transfers from large users to small residential users. My letter stands on its own. I'm always available to discuss any issue with you. In fact, my office is right across the street. So thank you so much for listening to my comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comment? Going once. Okay, public comment period is closed. Back to the board. Mr. Lee, would you like to respond to the comments, please?
I wrote as fast as I could, and I will go through them. If I missed anything, I would request that, Jerry Lynn, maybe you could jar my memory on some of those issues. So I have I have to read my own writing here too. The sewer water rates over 5 years, that's in the rate study. That was the very first question, was it really should look at the 5-year and separate out the sewer rates, the water rates, what the percentages are, and I would request that anybody that has an interest in that look at the 5-year study. This is a 1-year budget this time that's in front of you today, and we're trying to get that budget, you know, through the process. So we do have a rate study. We do have a plan for 5 years. This is the start of it, but it is a 1-year budget. Water augmentation, and the question was about the $20 million voluntary contribution, and I will confirm that the voluntary contribution was to offset capacity charges. It had nothing to do with the water augmentation program. There is another obligation of FORA's of about $23 million, Michael, about $23 million for the water augmentation program, and that is still in effect as I understand. So when we do get a water augmentation program rolling, we get that up and running, that will actually kick in. So to answer the question, yes, this $20 million voluntary does not cover the augmentation program. The 218 process. District ran through a 218 process that started last fall. It was, the first round was questionable, so we hired a consultant, a lawyer specializing in the 218 process to say, okay, where did we go wrong? What can we do to improve it? And the lawyer gave us recommendations, and so we did it again. We wanted to make sure we had everything covered, and we did it exactly the way that was recommended to make sure that we were doing it correctly. So there were a number of questions regarding the 218 process, and I'm willing to go into the details of those at a later date, but that really doesn't impact the budget before you today. To me, that's a whole separate issue unless somebody else wants to see it and discuss it today. We did receive a number of protests from large land use jurisdictions in the Ord community. There is no doubt about that. CSUMB, the cities of Marina and Seaside, and a number of other agencies did protest. So, we do recognize that, and they were included in the protest. Let's see here. There was corrections regarding the draft minutes of May 21st, and seemed to me that that was dealt with during the discussion, so I don't think I need to go into that. 218 question again. And I wrote down capacity fees, question marks. Diana, can you jar my memory? Where's Diana? Methodology versus the years? Was that the question? Sorry. I'm still not remembering what the question was, so I'm going to bypass that one. If anyone remembers, please remind me. Augmentation program was a question. The augmentation program is not included in this budget. We competed back and forth in the WWOC and in the district whether we include it or we don't include it. We had competing concepts of, no, it should be in the budget. No, it shouldn't be in the budget. We want it separate from the budget. Steve even acknowledged that at the beginning of his presentation today, that it has been decoupled. Well, that was a conscientious decision that was made by a group of individuals, not just Marina Coast Water District. We wanted to make sure that that was not reflected in this budget, and it is not reflected in this budget. We will include the augmentation program later. One of the ways we can do that is through a supplemental capacity charge to future developments, since they are the ones that are going to be benefiting from that. That doesn't impact today's budget. That is a capacity charge augmentation, if you will, that will be brought back and discussed at a later date. The increase of revenues on the ratepayers versus increasing capacity charges is also a big issue. The operation and maintenance portion of the budget before you today covers the existing system, and the capacity charges cover the new system, or the buy-in to the existing system for developers. It doesn't cover new systems, and we are restricted by law to charge the developer, to charge new buy-in basically only their fair share of the existing system. We can't charge them new systems that don't exist yet unless we get an agreement with them, and we hope to do that in the future. So that's important that we recognize that the existing customers are being asked to pay for the existing system. They're not being asked to pay for any more. Noted that Ms. Parker was going to be, would have recommended against it due to the burden of the ratepayers on the regional desalination project. And again, the existing ratepayers haven't been burdened with that. There was a conscientious decision to use reserves to pay for that project. That's important to understand. That's exactly what reserves are for. And everybody at the time seemed to be for it. Everybody wanted that project to succeed. I think everybody still wants a project to succeed. I don't think that's in question. Using reserves to fund capital projects like that is a very valid way to do things. It's almost recommended for large projects like that. So the existing ratepayers are not burdened with that. We are trying to recover that money. We have high hopes of recovering that money, but it doesn't impact the operation and maintenance of the Ord community. We are still not covering our day-to-day costs. And that's important to remember. The third of an acre foot per year. That is currently what we have used or are using for usage out there per unit, per meter. We are looking at that. Again, that is going to be part of the augmentation program conservation discussion. If we can retrofit old units to bring their conservation down, we can help offset that. If new units coming online are using less, we recognize that. We go through a very extensive process trying to develop what new developments are going to be using for water. We don't just do a blanket third of a unit per development. That's what we're gonna go with. We go through a very extensive process of determining what their usage is actually going to be. And that's how it's allocated out. For capacity charges in the system, for system facilities, an 8-inch pipe is required for fire flow, 12-inch pipe required for fire flow. Individual unit uses on that have a very limited impact on what size our facilities should be. The sizes of our facilities are based on fire flow demand, and I don't think we want to be reducing that. I really don't. And conservation, again, very important. We really want to move that program forward. Cost allocation. That has come up repeatedly, and we've tried to explain it repeatedly, and I'm not sure that we're saying it clearly or what, but the cost allocation for administration and overhead between the two cost centers of the district is based on water usage. So even though the Ord community and the Central Marina community have the same number of users, the Ord community users tend to use about twice as much water. They have larger jurisdictions, larger facilities, things along that line. And so those users, on average, use twice as much water. So I think that's important to understand, and that's how the cost is allocated. It's based on usage. Cost of service, I wrote down, but didn't follow through on that. And the low-income housing, again, the budget before you today reflects what it costs to provide the service. If we can find a way to help those who need it the most, I'm more than willing to pursue those avenues. I encourage people to come talk to me if they have ideas on how they can make that happen. We have to provide the service. Again, I've said this repeatedly, 24/7, 365. That's my mantra. We are on all the time. We need to be, and there's a certain cost associated with that. If there are ways that the community can assist those in need who need it the most, I'm willing to pursue those. The district is willing to implement programs to help for others to help offset the costs. And then the final comment was about that as well. Coalition for the Homeless provided comments regarding those in need, and I really would like to help those in need. I hope we can get some programs. My board has indicated a willingness to get some programs off the ground to help those in need. We just don't necessarily know how. We're looking for answers.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Okay, back to the board. Entertain any last-minute questions or to entertain a motion? Councilmember Lucius.
Thank you. I guess I still have a follow-up question about how the 218 votes were counted and whether or not the two cost centers were combined, and if they were, why would they be combined if we only have to consider the one cost center?
Mr. Lee.
I'm going to pass the buck and throw my special legal counsel under the bus. Ms. Patty Quilizapa is here. She was our specialist that we hired to run us through the 218 process. So I'm going to defer to her. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Patty Quilizapa. I'm special counsel to Marina Coast Water District with respect to the Prop 218 issues. And yes, I was brought on in February to look at the process that Marina Coast Water District had taken previously with regards to the two cost centers. There has been some development in Prop 218. There aren't too many 218 decisions out there that explain every single procedure that that constitutional mandate requires. There has been a development in 218 in a decision that's the Morgan versus IID decision, and I know I'm not speaking to all attorneys here, but basically what the court has interpreted is if that a public agency is providing service to one single area, and that is what Marina Coast is doing. If its budget and its rates are made up of costs that are shared and its fees are proposed for a particular area, all parcel owners have to pay their fair share. So in other words, if the district allows for a minority of a subset of the parcels that are subject to the fee to protest a particular, just one portion of the fee, then it's requiring the other subset of the parcel owners to subsidize. So basically what Prop 218 requires is that all parcels that are subject to the fee, to a fee, which has shared costs in multiple ways, that all parcels be provided the opportunity to protest. How that breaks down, the district cannot change or divide up its areas for purposes of allowing a successful protest, a higher protest weighted right to one subset over the other. It has a rate structure that it's proposing, and that's what the law provides for at this time. And we made a public presentation at the March 3rd meeting, I believe, with a memorandum that provides all of the information and the analysis, and we have not received anything contradicting any of that analysis as well.
Thank you. Mayor Rubio.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 items, so I might be a little lengthy. But I too want to thank Brian, Leaf, and MCWD staff. You can go ahead and sit down.
Thank you.
For all their hard work. You know, I mean, this isn't about, you know, we don't like MCWD. It's about, you know, we need to understand this whole thing. And I know that you're the interim and you picked up quite a bit of work that you're trying to, you know, like drink water through a fire hose. I understand that. But one of the issues for us, and I wasn't going to talk about representation, but it got brought up several times here, so I have some thoughts on that. The representation and the annexation seems to be the vehicle that representation is going to be addressed by. But for the jurisdictions, if we're not confident in the outcomes, why would we allow annexation? If we're not sure that we're going to get what we're promised, and this issue of the cost centers and the rolling in of the 218 votes, there is two separate segments to that district. It may be one geographic area, but one is covered by the district and is represented, and the other is by contract. Now, if the folks that are being affected by contract decide that, you know what, this is not good for our community, then they would come to FORA and say, you know what, we want a different contractor. We want a different source of water. We want someone else to run our facilities. So it really is two different communities. And, you know, in the interim on the representation issue, is there a advisory committee of people in the ORD community that can advise the board? Has that been considered? And then secondly, you know, following that trend, as Marina Coast Water District is a vendor to the Fort Ord Reuse Authority by contract, are there any accountability metrics that we apply to the performance of MCWD in meeting those objectives? And how do we measure that? How do we come to the board and say, well, this is what we've done, this is how we met this objective, this one, this one, this one? And I think that's a real concern for us, because it leads to the question for MCWD, is operating the ORD community still a good idea for you? Are you going to be able to meet those obligations? Is it really too much of a burden for your capital improvement program? Can you really handle that? And for FORA, is MCWD still the right vendor for Fort Ord? So the next thing I want to know is, you know, what the process is here for us on the board. What are our options in regards to the vote on this budget? The budget is effective July 1? Okay. Do we have to approve it? What's the effect of that? Two, if we take no position, what is the effect of that? And if we vote no, what is the effect of that?
Mr. Lee, do you want to respond, please?
Thank you.
Again, I will do the best I can. Regarding representation and annexation, an argument can be made that the ORD community, you are the representation on the FORA board, and the contract between the district and FORA is the avenue right now which is used to provide their concerns to the district. The concept of a committee of ORD community members providing service to the Marina Coast Water District Board actually has been discussed, and we are looking to probably start that this year, and I may even commit to have the discussion with President Moore this week or next week to make sure that we get that on the agenda for open discussion at the board level. I think it's a good idea, and I know that the board, at least portions of the board, consider it a good idea. We want to make sure the ORD community is heard. We really do. Regarding the contract requirements of providing water service to ORD, it's interesting that you would bring that up, because it's almost the exact flip side, reverse of what's going down on the peninsula right now with Measure O. You know, and if people aren't happy with their current service, are they really going to take the effort to kick out the current provider and bring in a new provider, which brings a lot of risk with it? Or are they going to try and find a way to unify or reach agreement with the areas that they can with the existing provider? I'm hopeful we can find a way to reach agreement on these issues. I'm hopeful we can build a relationship beyond where we are right now of trust openness, discussion, honesty, and we can work with each other to make it happen. You know, the question about capital, can we afford to do it? Can we afford to continue to provide service to the Ord community? Well, that's regardless of who's providing service, that question will still be there. It's still going to happen. You know, the Ord community requires a certain level of service that has to happen, and that's going to require a certain amount of money. And it's not my money, it's not Marina Coast's money, it's the ratepayers' money. And we need to make sure we're doing the best for the ratepayers. Everybody here needs to make sure we're doing the best for the ratepayers. And that's what we're trying to do. I think that's what we collectively, that's a capital we, are trying to do. There is a performance matrix used to measure how we do. It's built into the contract that we have with FORA, and the Water Wastewater Oversight Committee on a yearly basis does measure the district's performance. So, and we went through that. Michael, I want to say, yeah, we're coming up to that performance matrix again and measurement again. So we do it at least once a year. And regarding the question on what actions the board takes, the FORA board takes, and how does it impact the rates, the board can choose to take no action. The board can choose to approve. The board can choose to not approve. There are contractual requirements associated with not approving it that the board needs to be made aware of. Michael would provide better input than I would. I'm hopeful the board will support us. I think it's a good budget. I think it's a good starting point for a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, long-range plan to get the Ord community whole, to provide service to the Ord community in the long term. So regarding that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chair Edlin.
Okay. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem O'Connell.
Yes, just briefly. Assuming that the procedure followed in the 218 this year, combining Central Marina with Fort Ord Community, is the correct way of doing it, does that in somehow invalidate the previous year's increases in process that were done separately with Fort Ord Community in one hand and Central Marina on the other?
I'm going to have to defer again to special counsel. Thank you.
Lawyer versus lawyer.
I have not looked into the past processes, and I would not feel comfortable speaking as a lawyer to past processes, and I think that you'd appreciate that if you were a lawyer. So I definitely do not want to speak to that. A comment was made about the separate cost centers as a follow-up to my earlier commentary, whether the fact that the contract makes these separate cost centers. If we are operating solely by contract and Marina Coast is a vendor to Ord, Prop 218 does not apply at all. If we did not combine these centers and the fact that the district is imposing a fee in its complete service area, that's what gives the Ord community its protections, its right to protest. A service provided by contract as a vendor that can be taken out does not qualify as an imposition of a fee by a public agency. So viewing the district's services as a public service is what triggers 218. So in our view, what the district is doing is trying to be a public service provider to the whole area, and that's what triggers its duties and its obligations under 218.
Thank you. Any other question by board member? Yes, Director Moore.
Just a question actually for Councilmember O'Connell. If the answer to that question is sufficiently important to you, we'll ask special counsel to obtain it for us.
Yes, it is to me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for the offer. Yes.
If no one else wanted to go, okay. I'd be. Well, it was surprising to me when the lawyer mentioned that it seems as though they were doing the Ord community ratepayers a favor by allowing them to participate in the 218 because we're under contract. And I was in there before she even stated it, because what they said was that there are two separate centers, but we're going to combine them because we will leave the Marina community out if we didn't let them vote on 218. Even though we separate them for everything else, but when 218 came up, we combine them. And you have to ask yourself why. If they're always together, then why would you separate the cost out? But my point is simply is, where is the representation for those people at? Now we know it's back here to the board. If it's back here to the board, then why the 218? Why did it get sent to 218 letters then? If it's out here at the board, then why is it 218 letters? And what I think Marina Coast needs to do, and I'll start off by saying I think they did a wonderful job. I think the interim general manager did a good job with the presentation. But what they're not realizing is the reason why they always have a hard time with this budget is we want those ratepayers to have some representation on those boards, on that board. We always can work out the water, we always can work out the augmentation, we always can work out the rates, because we asked for the audit, the analysis, and it came back saying they deserve or they can use this money. But if the ratepayers, and I think the interim manager just said, it's the ratepayers, it's their money, but they don't have no representation on that board. So we are here representing them, and that's the hurdle we have to get over. So for me, today, I can't get over that hurdle because I don't see the seriousness in Marina Coast Water Management District's board about bringing forward the representation for the OR community people to be represented on that board. I find out today it's a 5-year process. They're committed to the 5-year process. So when is that going to be completed?
Whether we approve or disapprove or decide not to take it, we'd always request that the Marina Coast Water District representation come back in 90 days with a ratepayer, a augmentation program, and representation plan. I mean, that can always be included in the motion itself. So that gives you some options. Very good points, though, Ian.
Just 1 minute. That's what we said last year.
Right.
Right? Okay. So I just put that out there. And then one more thing about the wastewater committee, and I know they say every year that committee evaluates them. But that committee is not the board. And I haven't heard that committee come back and said they made their requirements. And I just want to echo, take another 15 seconds, echo what Mayor Rubio said about, I think the FORA board needs to look at if Marina Coast Water Management District is meeting their obligation and should FORA continue with their contract. And so we want to talk about Measure O, and we can look at that too. So we just need to talk in the open and put it on the board, and I appreciate the chair.
No, I appreciate your comments, but I think we all see here right now there's new leadership in the Marina Coast Water District, and I think the response we've gotten thus far is far beyond what we've gotten in the past. So I think this is like turning over a new stone, and we're attempting to bury the hatchet and move forward in a positive way, I think. Okay, any other comments or a motion? Yes, Councilman Lucius.
Thank you. I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't want to redo this in 90 days. I hope we don't have to do this again. I do have a process question. Because there are 2 resolutions, I don't know if, as a board, if we're treating each resolution separately, or if, so I don't know if we are discussing and voting on each of them separately, or if we are just looking for a motion to adopt the compensation plan, which would include both the capacity charges and the rate increases. So
that will be up to the motion maker. I believe Mayor Rubio, you had your hand up.
Well, I had another, my first question didn't get answered about if we have no vote, it still gets implemented, I believe. If we have a yes vote, it gets implemented, and if it's a no vote, does it go back to admin for a recast, or what's, I just want to know what's going on there.
Mr. Chair, if I might.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna move that we continue this till next month and refer it back to admin for a variety of reasons. I think both the mayor and Mr. Oglesby spoke well to the fact that we've had this discussion about a ratepayer, a ratepayers representation in some sort of advisory committee. I think we could come back with that formed at the next meeting. I think that Diane Ingersoll with the city of Seaside brought up a variety of unanswered questions that didn't get fully flushed out at admin. And I frankly don't like it when you put admin through all this work, but there's no recommendation because it hasn't been fleshed out in its entirety. And I believe the last meeting was upwards of 4 hours by the admin committee. I think it exceeded the complexities of some of the formulas, exceeded the pay grade of several people that were there, including my staff. But I think it was good discussion, and I think it gets down into the weeds where we need to get on this. And I will say, Brian, you've been handed a very difficult task. You know, when you find you join a team that's been spending their deficits, I mean, they've been going into deficit spending their reserves. You've got a hard hill to climb, and you got to get out of it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You've got to find a way out. But I think if you use the time that you used last time with admin, and you come back with some ability for representation through an advisory group, and you listen to that group and utilize them as your vehicle to solving your problems, I think you'll be better off. So I move a continuance with direction to admin.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Potter and a second by Mayor Gunter. Mr. Lee, would you give me the implications if we do vote to do this? What kind of effect will that have on the Marina Coast Water District?
Well, as I understand, the FORA has an obligation to respond to the district within 3 months of submittal of the compensation plan. So by deferring it, you are moving further beyond that 3-month time frame. And from my calculation, the 3-month time frame was actually this last Tuesday. So we are here today to listen to you, but the further we push this out, the more likely is that the budget will be deemed adopted by inaction.
Attorney, our counsel, John Giffen, do you have anything to say about that?
Nothing directly. I would certainly, the 90-day period, I didn't calculate it.
Understand.
But that is the standard. I don't know if it ran or not.
Will your representative, if we decide to delay this for 1 month, will your representatives be able to interact with the admin committee and meet our requirements and provide the input that we're asking for?
Regardless of whether
Yes.
anything, I mean, regardless of what happens, we will continue to meet with the admin committee. We will try and get their answers questioned. It was a relatively moving target, unfortunately, because every time we answered a question, it would shift and pivot because either they didn't like the answer or the answer wasn't quite what they were hoping for. So it was an ongoing discussion, and yes, it was very lengthy at times, and both sides tried. I don't want to point fingers at anybody. We all tried to get along, and there were periods of time where it was, you know, white knuckles gripping the table and things like that, but we ended up walking out of that room every time being able to shake hands, so I think it was a good process.
Sounds good. Mayor Rubio.
Yeah, the question for me is, and if a continuation isn't a response to you, then a no vote would be a response to you, and we could bring it back at the next meeting and give you the affirmative vote that you want. And would you be able to implement if we gave you a no vote?
There are specific requirements in the contract regarding the FORA board's obligation, for FORA's obligation to discuss our budget. A no vote does not meet that requirement as far as I understand. FORA must provide us with a letter that details specific items in the budget and recommendations for changes to those items. So there's a mountain or a hill to climb that FORA is responsible to do, and they have to do it within that 3-month window per contract. So a no vote is not sufficient to stop us from moving forward deeming the budget approved by FORA, but I'm here today to listen, to address the comments, to try and make changes, to try and build a relationship here. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, Mr. Ensley, you have some input on this, I believe.
I think that from the standpoint of FORA, we take direction from the FORA board. So the FORA board could give us specific or even general instructions as to the kind of methodology that they'd like to see come back. It could come back as part of a packaged yes vote, no vote, non-vote. It's kind of your choice. It sounds like the no vote is not as desirable because you have this 90-day period that we have to deal with. The 90-day period, of course, I would defer to authority council, but it's basically depends on how you count. So you have a budget that gets submitted, but if it's not deemed complete, if all the questions aren't answered, then how can you do the analysis? And I think that's the problem that your admin and your WWOC have had. They don't feel all their questions have been answered. So as staff, we would do our best to memorialize what you want us to bring back, and we would do that in letter form. We've done it in years past and provided it to MCWD in great specifics about what the issues are and why there might be a denial, or why you could vote yes based on particular caveats. You could agree to less than the full request. I mean, it's pretty much an open field.
Our attorney has not had the opportunity to look at the actual dates and look at the letter of the law with regard to the actual timeline for 90 days, so he's going to have to study that later on. I guess right now we're looking at possibility of a continuance. If I get a...
You have a motion and you have a second.
Okay, we have a motion second.
I'm
Now,
about to call a question, but...
Okay.
On a second. Now,
More discussion.
I want and I'll be quick, I want the attorney to look at, if we're the governing authority, we're approving the budget, it should be when we accept the document for processing, for a vote, not when they turn it in, not when it's submitted from the subordinate body. If it's our budget to adopt, there's no way that the subordinate agency could tell us when it was prepared or when
So
it's
noted.
ready. Okay, and we're getting to his motion. That's
Okay.
I
So we-
appreciate the supervisor's compromise on that.
Very sage. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? Seeing none, let's have a roll call. Never mind. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to the continuation? We have one Councilmember Lucius is opposed. Okay. This will be brought back the next motion, or the next meeting we have. Thank you very much, everybody. Good discussion. I think we're going to get good cooperation between Marina Coast Water District. Thank you for your team presentation. Again, it's light years above what we've had in the past. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the public comment period. Any member of the public may address the board on any item not on the agenda. You've got 3 minutes. Any member of the public wishing to address the board? Seeing none, public comment period is closed. Any items for members? Seeing none, ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned. Thank you very much for your hard work.